Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how the world is starting to de-risk themselves from United States, and also how the world is actually moving more towards trading with China and also building diplomatic links with China as well. So this article came out, I think about 3 days ago on the Financial Times. Um, this is behind a paywall, so I can't click on it. But I did read it on the train a few days ago when it came out on the Financial Times. So I read it and I found it quite interesting. Financial Times has been very anti-Chinese for years. I stopped reading the Financial Times all the way back from 2010 because they have had a very strict anti-Chinese policy. All the articles was just bad things about China. China's going to collapse, and all these ridiculous stories. And suddenly, after Trump came into power, suddenly the Financial Times, as well as other British press, started becoming China friendly. They started putting nice articles about China and bad articles about Trump. So it's not just every newspaper, by the way, because a lot of the newspaper in England are basically paid for by the American CIA, NED, and other intelligence sources, which give them false information and false stories. They also these a lot of these British articles are also there to program the British public, make them stupid, and also a lot of propaganda as well. Financial Times was one of them for a long time. But they are clearly anti-Trump because as soon as Trump came into power, they have been changing their tune. But this is not just the Financial Times talking. The whole world is turning against America and especially Trump. I mean, despite all the tariffs that America has placed on China, you can see China has had a record 1.2 trillion dollar trade surplus despite US tariffs. So that tells you a lot. What does that tell you? It tells you that more and more countries are trading with China. Trade with China is not becoming less because of tariffs. There is more and more countries trading with China. Even if America is trading less with China, more countries are still trading with China, and China is growing its trade surplus. But Trump is very low IQ because even if he places tariffs on China, China still has ways to transport Chinese goods into America. There's many ways. They can trade via other countries, for example. They can trade. They can set up factories in Mexico and other South American countries and transport from there. There's many ways to get around tariffs. But obviously, the tariff data is not going to show that. But the fact is, more and more countries are trading with China and they're trading less with America and Europe. So that tells you something. Trump has also threatened 25% tariffs on any country that deals with Iran. It just shows that he's still very, you know, he's very, would you say, he doesn't think before he speaks. Every single press conference, he seems to throw tariffs here and there, and he forgets which country has which tariffs. And he promised Americans he's going to pay them $2,000. And then when the reporter asked him yesterday, when's the $2,000 check coming? He said, I didn't say that. When did I say that? And then he also, promised the American public he would remove the income tax. And when the reporter asked him about, when will you remove the income tax? Trump was like, I didn't say that. When did I promise that? I didn't promise that. He says a lot of things, and then he backtracks afterwards. He either tacos or he forgets what he says or what he's done. A funny thing happened during a press conference with the oil executives the other day, and Trump tried to pull a fast one to the Exxon Mobil executive. He said, "Why did you leave Venezuela? Why did you leave? Nobody asked you to leave." And and the executive said, "We left because you placed sanctions on us. You know, you basically put sanctions, and we had no choice but to leave." So Trump does all of these ridiculous actions, and he forgets what he does. And and that's just the story. It's very, very unstable. And I think all the countries in the world are looking at Trump and they're realizing, America is just not a stable place to do business in because Trump can wake up one day, place tariffs on you for no reason whatsoever, and then take him off the other day, then put him back on a day later. So there's no, stability with Trump. So this 25% tariff on countries that deal with Iran is mainly, it's mainly for China really, because China does most of its business with Iran and as well as Russia as well, and India. But India has actually backed off. India has there was a port in Iran called Chabahar port, which India was managing, and Trump has placed sanctions on that port. And guess what India did? They pulled out. They pulled out of the port and they just left. They just left everything standing and went back to India. So India basically follows the rules with American tariffs. They don't. You know, they call themselves a superpower, but they act like slaves basically. So the story here was why is the world, decoupling from America? And this article here shows that world until recently believed that US-China decoupling was on the way. It turns out that most countries are now scrambling to de-risk from America. So instead of decoupling and de-risking from China, most of the world is actually de-risking from America because you have to de-risk from America because it all started with Trump on Liberation Day. He placed all of these ridiculous sanctions and tariffs on countries, even his allies. So if you're an ally and you've been trading with America, I mean, countries such as Canada, for example, if you've been trading for America and you rely on American goods and you rely on American trade, suddenly Trump places all these sanctions and tariffs on you. What are you going to do? You're going to be stuck, right? Your economy is going to be absolutely destroyed. If you didn't diversify your economy, then you are absolutely going to be wiped out. And this is what happened to Canada because Canada is pretty much reliant on America. So you had the Canadian Prime Minister coming to China and yesterday, and he basically said that there's a new world order and he wants to be part of this new world order alongside China. He he cancelled a lot of the tariffs that Canada placed on China, like EV cars. I think 49,000 EV cars are going to come into Canada with only 6% tariff rather than 100% tariff. And also, so this is just a start, guys. I mean, this is just a start of Canada's trade with China. I mean, Trudeau was very anti-Chinese. He was a puppet of America, and he obviously kidnapped Meng Wanzhou, and he placed 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs. He cancelled Huawei. He did many things which were anti-Chinese, and but the new Canadian Prime Minister seems to be very clued on, and he knows what he's doing. So countries around the world, Canada is just one example. They are starting to trade more with China now. Other countries are also starting to trade with China more because Trump's, adventures with Greenland, with Venezuela, with Iran, Trump's adventures with other countries around the world, which you know he was supposed to be friends and allies with. For example, the way he's treating Ukraine is supposed to be his ally, and the way he's treating Europe, the way he's treating Britain, the way he's treating a lot of his allies around the world. He's alienating the whole world to trade outside US US dollar. And this is why the price of gold has been rising. If you guys notice the gold market, gold has been going skyrocketing, and also silver's been skyrocketing as well. And the only reason it's doing that is because the dollar is falling. Less people are dumping dollars, people are dumping treasuries, people are dumping anything to do with the US. They're dumping trade deals. They rather trade with China rather than America. And China is actually looking like the most stable and the grown-up party in the room. They are not threatening Venezuela. They're not threatening Iran. They're not threatening, Greenland. It's Trump and America that's doing that. And Trump's action shows that even though Greenland is a NATO member, even though Greenland you know, is their ally, and even though Denmark has given America years and years of loyal, slave service. Denmark has been very, very pro America. They've helped America basically spy on Merkel. They've done all these anti-Chinese policies. Denmark has been very, very a loyal dog to the Americans. And this is how they treat their loyal dogs, basically. They basically take away their, Greenland from them. So you see from the last couple of days, all the main headlines in the papers were Iran protest this, Iran protest that. All the papers were going along with these protests. But not many papers were talking about the protests happening in Minnesota in United States. Suddenly, the world is very quiet when these protests happen in America. But suddenly they raise their voice when it happens in Iran. But if it happens in America, it doesn't really matter, no problem whatsoever. Trump has even threatened to invoke insurrection, the Insurrection Act in Minnesota if this continues. So it just shows the double standards that's going on around the world. He's completely lost the Gen Z. Trump has completely lost the Gen Z. The Gen Z, when he came into power, he promised to know, stop the war in Gaza, and he said he promised to the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. What has he done in Gaza? There is no stop or ceasefire in Gaza. Basically, Israel is still bombing Gaza. The people are dying. They are freezing to death in tents. They are not allowed medicine, or they're just dying daily. Kids are dying out of temperature and stuff like that. It's really sad to see, guys. And Trump is just up to no good with the rest of the world. He wants to take Greenland. He wants to obviously take Venezuela's oil. He wants to take Iranian oil and gas and other resources. He's just after countries with resources. All of these countries have got one thing in common. They've all got resources. They got gas, they got oil, they got rare earths, they got minerals, gold. They have many, many resources. And funnily enough, these are the countries he's going after. So he cannot lie to the public or the world. The world knows exactly what America's trying to do. And this is why, countries are now scrambling to kind of de-risk themselves from America. They do not want any part of it. If America wants to carry on going along this route, they are not going to have any allies or countries, you know, that back them whatsoever. No country will use dollars. The world is moving away from dollars. Now, China has released the digital yuan, and that's being circulated around the world. More and more countries are trading with each other with their own domestic currencies. Sometimes they use the Chinese yuan, sometimes they use the Russian ruble to buy Russian gas and oil. Countries are starting to use their own, currencies. And if BRICS releases a BRICS currency, then it's game over, guys. It's absolutely game over. It's going to be game over for the EU because more and more countries are going to start using the BRICS currencies, and it's going to be game over for the United States dollar. The dollar is absolutely falling. falling off a cliff at the moment. Trump is announcing a 1.5 trillion defense budget as well. I mean, where do you guys think this money is going to be coming from? They're already huge debt, and their deficit is growing year by year, which means that their debt to GDP ratio has been going down, which means they borrow more money than they make money. So if they borrow more money than they make money, how are they going to increase the defense budget to 1.5 trillion without printing more dollars or cutting, vital stuff like social benefits and healthcare and things like that? So looks like they're going to be printing the money. And when they start printing all this money to fund their military, this reminds me of the last days of the Roman Empire. I mean, if you guys have, I'm sure a lot of you have studied history. Every single dying empire, they do the same thing. They basically have wars. They pay huge amounts of money to the military to fund these wars, and eventually the empire collapses. And all the empires in the past have gone through it. And looks like America is going through the same path as well. They're going to, pay 1.5 trillion dollars in their trillion dollars in their military, and for what? For to pay for more military bases around the world, to pay for more CIA regime change, to pay for weapons, to fund wars and proxy wars. This doesn't make any sense, guys. Doesn't make any sense. And 1.5 trillion is it's double than what it was last year or the year before. The year before, I think it was right 800 billion they were paying for defense. And now, if it goes up to 1.5 trillion, it's almost double. They're doubling their defense budget. And they're obviously going to use this defense budget to, have more wars around the world, to take Greenland. They're going to use it to take Greenland. They're going to use it to take Venezuela. And then they'll probably use it to attack Iran as well. And the world is not just not going to stand for it, guys. I mean, yeah, the Western world will always be puppets of America. I'm talking about Europe and, Japan and South Korea and places like that. But the rest of the world, they're not going to stand for it. You know, there's going to come a time when the rest of the world just has enough of America and they do not trade with America at all. Not even one trade. They think they're just going to say, you know what, it's just not worth trading with America. You know, everything we need is there in China, or we will build our own manufacturing and we can get all the raw materials from China and we will build our own factories. Let's not buy stuff from America anymore. You don't even have to buy advanced materials from America anymore because there was a time when rest of the world were buying advanced materials from America and they were buying low-end materials from China. Things have changed now. China is now doing advanced manufacturing. So any advanced units and manufacturing you can get from China. You can buy advanced semiconductors. You can buy advanced, X-ray machines. You can buy even DUV machines you can buy from China. You can buy, anything you want. High-end goods, high-end manufacturing. You don't have to buy it from America or the West anymore. So the world has a choice now. And also, China is helping a lot of the global South countries with technology as well. So all the technology that the West used to hold for themselves, because they used to hold all that technology, guys, they never used to share it with the rest of the world. Now China is basically sharing that technology with the rest of the world. They are putting, code open source like DeepSeek. They are putting all these DeepSeek codes and all these other codes online, open source for others to use and share. So, and the West doesn't like it because all of this code and all this technology, the West used to hoard for themselves because they, if they hoard that technology, the world is basically forced to buy that technology from them, and that's the reason they do it. Things are changing now. This is why the dollar is falling, America is falling because they don't have the monopoly of holding these high-end manufacturing goods anymore. The only sector they still have in control at the moment is probably the Nvidia high-end chips. And even the Nvidia high-end chips, they're not allowed to sell to the rest of the world. They're not allowed to sell. I'm talking about the Blackwell chips, guys, not the H200. They're not still not allowed to sell to China, Russia, rest of the global South countries. Basically because it's too high-end, that chip. When China managed to release its EUV machine, because they already built the DUV machine and they can build their own semiconductors now, the low-end chips. But once they start building the high-end EUV machines, and it will be coming soon, guys. Whether it's this year or the next, or maybe in a couple of years, these EUV machines, once they're out in China, it's going to be game over. This is the last piece of technology that the West has got control over the rest of the world. So once these EUV machines get released in China, China can produce chips much cheaper compared to the rest of the world. Because the current EUV machines sold by ASML, they cost hundreds of millions of dollars just for one EUV machine. They are very, very expensive. And the reason they're very expensive because ASML basically has to source a lot of the materials from different parts of the world. For example, the laser gets made in United States, the mirror gets made in Germany. The neon gas used to come from Ukraine, but now it comes from China. You get the point. They have to basically source hundreds and thousands of materials, all from different parts of the world, and then put it together. That's why it's so expensive. China, if they can build an EUV machine without the supply chain, so everything is built in-house. They get everything: the lasers, the mirrors, the gases, the rare earth minerals, everything that you need to build an EUV machine. If China can build it in-house, imagine the cost savings that China would have. Instead of paying hundreds of millions for one machine, China can sell it for maybe a couple of million or even, 10 million, or for example. It's going to be a huge reduction, guys, huge reduction. And when that happens, China can start selling these machines to parts of the world which were not allowed to be sold by ASML. So ASML has got a big list of countries they cannot sell these machines to, including China, Russia, many global South countries, many sanctioned countries. China can start selling those machines to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world will catch up when it comes to chips and semiconductors. And this is going to be a huge issue for America because that's going to be a huge chunk of money just disappearing overnight. Instead of countries paying for the latest NVIDIA chips, they can make it themselves. They can use that machine, they can use the technology from China, they can use the software that's open source from China, and they can do it themselves. And it's going to be over once that happens, guys. Then, the American economy is just not going to function anymore because they have got nothing, they will have nothing that other parts of the world cannot get from China or other parts of the world, or they can't, manufacture themselves. So that day is coming very soon. And when that day comes, you will see a huge stock market collapse. You will see companies like TSMC collapsing overnight because they have spent billions and billions on these expensive ASMR machines. And suddenly these machines are going to be completely useless. China's going to be, selling these machines and also developing chips much cheaper price compared to TSMC. Because if you buy cheap machines, the cost of making chips is going to be cheaper. And China's going to be making these cheaper chips, sell it to the rest of the world for, tenth of the price TSMC makes. And that's it. Game over, guys. Completely game over. And that day is coming soon. Is coming very, very soon. So anyway, I'm going to end it there and let me know what you guys think and I'll see you in the next video. Take care for now.